Bornstein has previously denied President Trump wrote the letter himself. The White House says taking possession of the president's medical records is, quote, standard operating procedure, and said it was not accurate to describe the incident as a raid. NBC investigative reporter Anna Schechter broke the story. So let's go through that. Bornstein publicly tells people that he prescribed Propecia to President Trump. He's not allowed to do that. Whether or not it's a big drug or a little drug or embarrassing, not appropriate. So President Trump may have called and said, I'd like to take my records. But what actually went down?
Well, President Trump did not call. Instead, at 7 o'clock in the morning, 2 days after that story about Propecia ran, Keith Schiller, Trump's longtime bodyguard, who had a top job at the time in the White House, showed up unannounced and with two other men, one of them a Trump Organization top lawyer, to actually physically take the paper files outside of the office.
Bornstein was at work at that time?
He was parking the car. The young woman who answers the phone was the only one in the office, and she called Dr. Bornstein and said, there are these three men here. Please come. I'm a little nervous. Dr. Bornstein says he was extremely shaken and felt intimidated.
Was he given any sort of form authorizing the release of the records? Because if Trump's team wants to say this wasn't a raid, then there should be some official documentation.
He says he didn't see a medical release form called a HIPAA form. He says there may have been some piece of paper. Another person familiar with the incident says he thinks that there was a letter from Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who was the White House doctor at the time. But we don't know if it was a medical release form signed by the patient, which is
Did he call the police when it happened?
He regrets not calling the police, he tells me.
So why is he coming forward? I mean, let's take ourselves back in history. And when we first were introduced to this guy, we all thought he was a wackadoo. The letter that was written about President Trump, while he says now the president dictated the letter, I'd like to dictate a letter about myself, but the person who signs that letter, and that's Dr. Bornstein, okayed it at the time. So what's he doing now?
So now he's revising what he said about who actually wrote the letter. He told me a couple of years ago that he wrote the letter in 5 minutes, but that he had Trump in his ear, that he was using that kind of language. Now he's saying Trump actually wrote it or dictated it.
But doesn't that destroy all of his credibility? It doesn't matter. He's a doctor. Whether President Trump is in his ear, the doctor decides what the report should be. I could tell every doctor out there that I'm, 5'10", perfect health, perfect measurements, and the doctor would laugh me out the door and not sign their name to it. President Trump's not on the hook. The doctor is.
Well, this story just shows who Donald Trump chose as his doctor on the one hand, and also how he treats people. He sends a former bodyguard to go and get the records. Dr. Bornstein told me that he thought this was going to be fun, having his patient become the president of the United States. Instead, he feels spurned and cut off, and I think his feelings are hurt, and that's why he's coming out now.
I get it. His feelings are hurt, but all of this only knocks his own credibility, it seems like. Boy, all right, this is a stunning, amazing, extraordinary piece. It doesn't matter whether Propecia is embarrassing or not. That's your patient. Can't tell anyone. Up next, money, power, politics, my favorite part of the show. How a member of President Trump's Mar-a-Lago social circle reportedly delaying a major